Well, thank you, Mr. President. The first thing I want to do today is I want to compliment every senator sitting in this room. Because whether we agree on the policies here, we all agree on the passion that we have for our communities and the people that we represent. And I think we should all say thank you to ourselves for that, and thank you to each other. I'm going to do a little walk down memory lane, and how did we get here? So last summer I was not up for election, so I'm out doing a lot around my district, and I think the number one thing that I heard from everybody in the 12th Senate District, and the 12th Senate District is much different than a lot of the districts of the people that have stood up and spoke today. My largest community is 8,900 people, and I have 12 counties that I represent parts of. 8,900 people. And I know some of my other colleagues have some districts that are pretty sparse too, and then I have some colleagues in this room have huge districts. It takes me 3.5 hours to get from one side of my district to the other. I know some of you walk across your district. But as I went around the 12th Senate District last summer, I think it's last summer, all I heard was the number one thing was we can't fix our roads. And the real fear in my area was no ambulance service. That was the number one fear. We can't provide ambulance service. And I think I have the firm belief, as well as my district, that government's role is to provide for us the things that we can't provide for ourselves. Ambulance service, public safety, roads, those are core services that I think we need to provide for our constituency. So I reached out to the Towns Association, and I said, you guys got ideas? I reached out to the Counties Association, and they're like, yeah, let's sit down and go to work. So I sat down with the three associations, and that's the one thing I want to say here today. How many times have you seen those three associations who are competing for the same dollars all sit down together, work together, and come up with a solution, and never lose focus and never break ranks? My colleague that spoke a few minutes ago, I apologize, I don't know the district number, he said this was a compromise bill. Those groups compromised also, and they worked together to do it. And I applaud them on that. And as we've sat here and we've talked about who gets what under the shared revenue bill, they're pretty much the ones that came up with the formulas on this and decided who needed what most. So we sat down and we went to work. And the first thing we said is the old shared revenue formula is broke, but to try to go in and readjust the old shared revenue formula, you're going to create winners and losers. And that's not going to make anybody in this room happy, because we're going to all try to answer that. That's like we've always said, when you get elected, you're coming down here to fix school funding too. How's that been working for us? I mean, you can't. So then we said we're going to take $50 million of new money, and we're going to give that to the counties, and we're going to say that's where the counties are at. And then we thought we'd do towers, X number of dollars for the towns, X number of dollars for the counties, and X number of dollars for municipalities. Well, that wasn't working out so good either. So then we decided to go on size. And that's where we landed, and that's where the groups liked it, and I think it's the most equitable way to do it. So we took a pot of money, around $50 million, and said we're going to close those disparities under the old shared revenue formulas and the new. And the groups worked on that together, and we came up with where we're at now on closing those disparities. And is it perfect? There's no such thing as perfect. But I think we did a pretty good job on that. And then we started taking the rest of the new money and we started filling in on what those gaps are going to be. And how do we raise people up with inflationary? And my one colleague, senator from the Madison area, pointed out that some are getting a 20% increase, but some are getting 5,000% increase. Oh my God, that's unheard of. So the town of Popple River is getting a 5,070% increase. Wow. That's not really fair to the other communities, is it, that are getting 20%? But let's put it into perspective. The town of Popple River gets $606 of shared revenue currently. What do you do with that? Fill up the dump truck? The price of fuel? Once, maybe twice? So they're going to get new money. I'm glad you're all sitting down. 30 grand. That's their $5,000, 500% or 5,000% increase, guys. So we can flip numbers, and numbers can give us all sorts of input. They're getting $30,000. That's their 5,000% increase. So that's where we brought up and tried to fill those disparities and give them some equality. So then, the local units of government said to me, we need an assembly lead on this. How do you feel about working with Representative Kurtz? I said, great. I love working with Tony. Good guy. So Tony and I are sitting down, and we're pulling this together, and we're going back and forth, and long meetings in the beginning. And then leadership came to us and said, oh, by the way, we have another component of this. Milwaukee's on a fiscal cliff. I said, okay. We need to figure out how are we going to help Milwaukee and what are the ideas so that they can help themselves through this fiscal cliff. So you got a senator from the 12th Senate District who doesn't represent a community over 9,000, and an assemblyman from southwestern Wisconsin whom I'm assuming doesn't have many large communities either, maybe 10, 15,000? 11,000. So now we're sitting down with the leadership in Milwaukee. And you know, I'm also going to give a shout out to the leadership in Milwaukee. I know them coming to the Wisconsin State Republican Legislature was a heavy lift for them. And I admire them for their tenacity. And maybe they've taken some hits back home or whatever it is. But they held tight together, and we are at where we are today. So the governor puts out a budget. Our shared revenue idea is in there. And then we have a percentage for the city and county of Milwaukee at 1%. Well, as we started to dive into this pension issue, we found out it was a lot more serious than what everyone had thought. And when you do a soft close on a pension, I learned so much about pension issues that I never thought I wanted to know, nor did I really want to know. Having said that, we found out a lot of things that really drove up that percentage. It took it from a 1% for the city and county to we're at 2.4. It's a lot of money. But I had a colleague of mine today say, you know what? What is a Republican philosophy? We pay our bills and we pay our debts. And if we make promises, we stick to them. That's my philosophy. That's how I was raised. Really strong German father. And we are giving Milwaukee the tools to stick with their promises, pay their debts, and move forward. And you know, I've heard a lot of conversation in here today, and I know it's what we do. But there's a lot of this going on. So-and-so did this, and that's why this has happened. Or so-and-so did this, and that's why this has happened. You know, we can point fingers till we're blue in the face, and we can talk about what hasn't been done in the past. Or we can stand here and sit here as colleagues. As our colleague just said, this is pretty historical for us lately. This is bipartisan. We have the executive branch that worked with our leadership to get this done. And there's a whole lot of people in this room to thank. Because they worked hard on this, and there's a lot of late nights. This is a win. It's a win for the 12th Senate District with no communities over the size of 9,000. It's a win for Madison. It's a win for Milwaukee. And I'm going to address one other thing that was said, and I think this is something that everybody in this room needs to realize and carry forward for as long as you are in this body, as long as you serve in this building. My fair share. I need my fair share. So I think I'm going to make this statement, and I think it's very true. You can take every sales tax dollar generated in the 12th Senate District, and you could combine that with maybe 3 or 4 senators in this room that come from pretty rural areas. We don't even begin to generate the sales tax of a Madison or a Milwaukee. So does that mean we don't deserve our fair share? But let me flip to another. Wisconsin doesn't operate independent of our large cities and our rural communities. We have senators that represent the breadbasket of Wisconsin, the Central Sands area. They feed our economic generators. Madison, Milwaukee can't grow their own food. Central Sands grows it for them, as well as a lot of other districts. So does that mean because we don't generate that sales tax in those rural areas that we're not entitled to it? One can't exist without the other. 12th Senate District. I produce your toilet paper, people. Does that mean somebody's got to do it, right? We have your forestry. We have your tourism. We have your lakes. We have your recreation area. We have our own amount of manufacturing. But does that mean we're less important and that we don't deserve? Every area of this state contributes to the state. Every area. Whether we're producing agriculture, we're feeding you. Whether we're producing the sales tax revenue to fund our schools and to fund some of the other things. Whether we're providing you with your entertainment, or we're providing you the area to come back and ground yourself. Take your family and recreate on a lake for a month, a week, whatever it is that you want. So I want to thank my colleagues that came together for this bill. I want to thank the governor for stepping up. I especially want to thank our majority leader, because there's a whole lot of things that have happened behind the scenes, and if it wasn't for our majority leader, this wouldn't have come together. And I would be so remiss if I did not thank our staff, because there's a whole lot of late nights, a whole lot of time spent with LFB, a whole lot of time spent with Ledge Council, where we were at home doing what we do, and they were spending the long hours sifting through those bills, making sure the language got right, catching it when the language wasn't right. So this is not perfect, but let's not let perfect get in the way of very, very good and a win for a lot of our communities. But you know, it's an overall win for the state of Wisconsin. Our major city is not going to go bankrupt. It's positive. We're going to give them the tools that they need. Our local communities are going to be able to provide the core services of government. And the biggest win is to the people that we represent. So when that tragedy strikes and they call 911, there's an ambulance that shows up. When their house is on fire, the firemen show up. And if there's a bad accident, if there's a tragedy, and we need our police force, we have the dollars invested so they show up. Thank you.